Hi, I'm Julie.
And I'm Caleb. Welcome to Nursing You, the podcast where we redefine nursing in today's healthcare landscape. Join Julie and I as we step outside the box on an unconventional healing journey.
Together, we're diving deep into the heart of nursing, exploring the intricate relationships between caregivers and patients with sincerity and depth.
Our mission is to create an open and collaborative experience where learning is expansive and fun.
From the psychological impacts of nursing to the larger implications on the healthcare system, we're sparking conversations that lead to healing and innovation.
We have serious experience and we won't pull our punches, but we'll also weave in some humor along the way because we all know laughter is often the best medicine.
It is. And we won't shy away from any topic, taboo or not. From violence and drugs to family and love, we're tackling it all.
Our nursing knowledge is our base, but we will be bringing insights from philosophy, religion, science, and art to deepen our understanding of the human experience.
So whether you're a nurse, a healthcare professional, or just someone curious about the world of caregiving, this podcast is for you.
One last thing, a quick disclaimer before we dive in. While we're both registered nurses, nothing we discuss here should be taken as medical advice. Always consult with your doctor or a qualified healthcare provider for any medical concerns you may have. The views expressed here are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of our employers or licensing bodies.
So let's get started on this journey together. Welcome to Nursing You, where every conversation leads to a healthier world.
All right.
Here we are. Little different scenery. We're just switching it up. Mm-hmm. And that's fine because we're
As we do.
As we do. And
As
it
we
just
do.
is. And it's fine. And everything works out. So today is fun because we have a guest that I've been anticipating for a while because we've been in talks. And her name is Renee, and she's a nurse, been a nurse for almost 20 years. And I worked with her for some time. And honestly, we were just talking about this, that my career at the place that I worked for 26 years is somewhat of a blur. So it's hard for me to like pinpoint time of like, oh yeah, she was there for 18 months or she was there for 2 years and it was this year and this is what I was doing and this is what my role was, because I did so many different roles so it just all kind of is one. But she worked there for a couple of years. And so during that time, I would have been full-time ICU. So I would have been full-time ICU nights. I was a charge nurse. And again, we just intuitively pick our guests as we're thinking of them because they're super amazing people that you have a career of decades, but you meet these like souls that just come in for short blips. And, we didn't ever do anything outside of work. It's just amazing the feelings and the energy that it's exchanged when you meet these people and then you work with them and then they leave and they move on and they do their stuff. But I've actually been kind of following her since she left, because she left in a school bus that she had redone, which I was like, that is so amazing. I was like, oh my God, I'm so tied down and I have kids and I do that. But that's like, for me, the ultimate, like, just fucking go. So she did, and she's done lots of things since then, and now currently works, which we'll get the details, but works in like a national park as a nurse, looking out, and her pictures on Facebook, she sees the mountains and like, I got goosebumps. She's in nature and like so grounded. And so I know that she's an amazing soul that we're going to get to know her nursing story, and the conversation is just going to be amazing. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. Let's bring her up.
Yes, let's do it.
Hello,
Renee!
everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hello.
It's so good. It's so good to have you on.
Thank you. What wonderful things you had to say. I will tell you, you actually were one of my bosses when I was there. You were
Okay.
not full-time nights, and I think you had just transitioned. So, and
Did I
at one
work day
point,
shift? So I think
You
I went to
did.
day shift in like the January-ish of 2018.
because I worked day shift and I
Okay.
wasn't working nights, and that's how I got to know you, because you were kind of jumping back and forth from the ICU and CCU.
Okay. So that's
Yeah.
that silly role that they created that was like a ICU, CCU, ER kind of like charge nurse. So I
Yeah.
did. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So, yeah.
So, but you started in CCU and then came over to ICU, right? Okay.
Correct. It's kind of a funny story because when I interviewed there, in my background and everything where I had come from, CCU was the same as MICU. So
Mhm.
medical ICU and cardiac ICU. That's what we called CCU.
Yeah.
So when it's kind of embarrassing almost. When I interviewed for CCU and got hired for that, that's what I thought I was walking into cardiac
Oh.
intensive care. And so,
Oh.
of course, my first day of orientation, it took me about 2 rooms to be like, but where's your monitoring? Is that you don't have
Oh,
them on the monitor?
no.
It took me that, a few hours into that day to realize, and it was funny because it was with Christina.
Yeah.
So it took
Oh,
me a bit
God,
to
that's so awesome.
understand I'm in. And so
Okay.
started my endeavor to get into the ICU from that point on. But
Yeah. The actual job that you thought you were interviewing for. Yeah, because
yes.
those 2 units is a whole different world, as we all know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I mean, I had some gnarly situations in CCU.
Absolutely.
It was no joke. Yeah.
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 No joke, that unit. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in one of your last podcasts, you would discuss the Hoyer lifts and
Yeah.
how you saw one fall out. That was actually my patient. I had just given report to the night nurse, and they went on to do their thing while I was still giving report about another patient. And when that happened,
That's so crazy that was your patient.
yeah.
But, it's interesting too that things like that happen in your nursing career, like, there are things that I can, like, explicitly remember, and I know Caleb can too, and they're different.
Yeah.
Like, we can have both been there. Like, you were there, clearly, so was I, because I remember
Mhm.
going into that room, but like, a lot of the details are just, again, a blur.
Yeah.
But I remember I just thought,
Yeah, it was
"No way."
quite an ordeal because
It was.
it was with another nurse that was involved was a brand new nurse. And of course
Oh,
that's very scary
yeah.
and yeah, it was an ordeal for sure.
Yes. Wow.
It's a nightmare. I have a nightmare that that wakes me up. That there's a patient on a gurney and they're around the corner from where I am, but I hear the gurney tipping over and the patient falling, and then I wake up. It's
no.
like falling out of a Hoyer lift, falling out of a gurney, like
Yeah.
same thing. It's a nightmare situation.
It is.
Any falling patient.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
For sure. That's why one of the reasons, and one of many reasons I liked ICUs, because we usually had PT.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys walk them because I'm
Right.
not catching them.
Right.
Yeah.
And they usually weren't
catch 'em.
able to get out of bed, or we
Yeah.
could restrain them so they would not get out of bed. It was a
Yeah.
lot more. It's really interesting because, to be an ICU nurse, it's like you have to have all that critical thinking, you have to have all that education, you have to have all of that intuition of anticipating things, but yet there's got to be some kind of personality thing around it because we like the control.
Mm.
So it can feel chaotic, and maybe I'm not speaking that right, because I feel like maybe med surg nurses, they develop their own sense of control with like 6 or 7 patients. We really need to get a med surg nurse on here. So raise your hand.
Yeah.
Anybody want to come
Yeah.
on? Because we don't have a lot of experience with that. To me, that's scary. And I'm sure they think the same thing coming into an ICU. But to me, going out, I always felt so out of control. So maybe it's just you develop your own control in whatever environment you're in.
Mm-hmm.
I found that, working in CCU was, in between the whole ICU and the med surg kind of environment. I've been house supervisor, so I've spent time out in med surg, and then in some of my travel assignments, you'd get floated out there and you're like, oh, Lord have mercy. I don't know how to do 7 patients, but I think for an ICU nurse in that environment is that you simply just don't have the time or resource to do the things for the patients that you see that need to be done. You
Yep.
can't. It's just
Yeah.
not an option. So
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about that in another podcast out. We were talking about like our best days of nursing.
mhm.
And when Caleb asked me about it, I couldn't really think of like a patient interaction that was, I was like, oh, that was amazing. My
Mhm.
choice was more, helping the other nurses, because that fulfilled me. I could get a sense
Mhm.
of completion out of that. And part of it, like I was said, kind of, it just, patient care let me down. And that was one of the reasons, because you feel,
Mhm.
I never felt like I had enough time. I couldn't
Yeah.
spend enough time doing the thing. So I always left unfulfilled. And that was,
Yeah, and to support that, if I were to, take just a second and think about my favorite or best day in nursing, it wasn't necessarily the prettiest or the most desired outcome. It might have actually been an outcome that led to a death or something like that. But it was was always the times that I felt like I could give my all and give them everything they needed.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
be there for them 100%, and for the families, or whatever the situation, when you felt like you could really do our job well and do what we know how to do really, really well. So
yes. Well, why don't you take us a little bit through kind of your career, what got you into nursing, some
okay.
places, types of nursing that you've done, and then what you were doing
Mhm.
now, and kind of
Okay.
how you got there, if you want.
Wow, what a journey it's been. Of course, when I had some idea of kind of where we might start this, and it takes you back. I actually, my career, I would say, actually started even before a nurse, because so I would have to go all the way back to like 1985, and I was pregnant with my first pregnancy, and it was twins, and so it was in Kansas City. And so at towards the end of the pregnancy, I went term, so that last like 4 to 6 weeks I was going to the hospital twice a week for testing. And so a relationship started building there with the nurses there. And honestly, I mean, I was a pretty simple girl, came from a pretty unstable background, home life, and a poor community, things like that. It was my first interaction into, quote, a professional environment, and I just kind of sucked it all in. And I went to the residence. I'm like lacking the the right verbiage there, but so I got to know one of the residents that actually helped deliver the twins. And then and I ended up right back pregnant again. But I had 3 under 2.
Ooh.
And when I had the second pregnancy, the resident that had delivered my first was actually the chief resident at that point. And so we just, I had her personal number. And so the relationship just built that way. And afterwards, those nurses and that doctor got me a job working at that hospital. And so
Wow.
that's where it all started.
Wow.
And I was a secretary and scrub tech, and that hospital was downtown. Had they implemented a 2-bed perinatal intensive care, and I was just obsessed. I just, they were like, get out of here. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I want to look, I want to see, I want to, and, and that's where it all started for me. So then, but I didn't, the circumstances weren't right. The correct motivation wasn't there to make it through nursing school until several years later. And several years later, I actually found myself, I call it a domestic engineer, being a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. I found myself single with 5 little kids at home, and I thought, Lord have mercy, what am I going to do?
Wow.
It was natural to me to be like, okay, well, let me just head back to the hospital. So then I started working ICU as a secretary. And I mean, I just knew that I wanted to be a nurse. I just knew that was the path for me. And I'd always felt that way. And nurses and techs, being ornery as they are, they put me in a situation that was it kind of broke my heart at first, but then it actually it went ahead and pushed me forward, in that they were like, oh, so you want to be a nurse? You think you're going to go to nursing school with 5 kids and come on in. If you want to be a nurse, come on in with us. And they invited me into one of the foulest patients to date I'd been around. And he was just a very angry, just nasty person, and like cruel to his wife, would spit on the floor. He was just, and they're like, here's nursing, and they were getting him off the commode. And of course I was so unprepared for that. And I was like almost vomiting. I had to leave the room. And one of the nurses followed me into the break room. And cause I was in tears, cause I was really like, I really want to be a nurse.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have done that. Let me show you a little trick. And she pulled out of her pocket a little bitty bottle of Vicks, mentholatum Vicks rub. You just pop that up there and you go on with your job. And she said, here's how we do it. And I was just like, okay. And so, and then they kind of just rallied around me a little bit and gave me the support. And that's where my journey started. I enrolled in school and away I went. So
Wow.
That's where it all started for me.
Yeah.
But after that, my last year, I did a nurse extern. And at this point, I'm in Oklahoma. I did a nurse extern in labor and delivery because that was what my love. That's honestly still my only regret at this point in nursing, is that I never found my way back to that. But I did labor and delivery as an extern, and there was a young lady that went into respiratory distress. And it wasn't that the nurses they were great nurses. They just weren't really trained in that. This wasn't a high level, didn't have a perinatal intensive care or anything like that. They were really caught off guard. They didn't know. And I had also seen another situation where it was a critical situation with a mom, and actually they lost the mom. And I just felt, I didn't want to feel unprepared. So when I went to my clinicals in ICU, at that point, I made a decision, you know what, let me go get that. Let me go get that ability and that skill set, and then find my way back to labor and delivery. And so when I got out of nursing school, I went right straight into ICU and kind of never really made my way back to labor and delivery.
Those ICU skills are invaluable, though.
They are.
If you start there, you can go anywhere, and you're going to be valuable.
Yeah. And I, being house supervisor, I was able to, have a bird's eye view of all areas of the hospital and all units and stuff. And I would tell, because there would always be a little bit of contention, you'd get called to a rapid and you'd be like, well, where's the patient's nurse, and things like that. And so I saw a lot of that, push between those two areas. And then when I started supervising all of it, I realized it's not a matter of these nurses are smarter than these nurses. It's that these nurses are trained this way, and they're thinking and their skill set and what they can and cannot do. And these nurses over here are trained this way. It's just different. And I'm an ICU nurse. I consider myself very knowledgeable, a high skill set. And you throw me into med surg with 7-8 patients, and I'm like,
oh God, totally.
I don't know.
Totally.
How do you guys do it? How do you do it? Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm definitely, and I feel like so many things, I learned so many things through my career in ICU that I've applied throughout my entire life, not just work. So, it gave me an opportunity to, I'm thankful all the time. I still remember my preceptor, everything. My beginning mattered so much in how my career went, and I think about that, I've been an instructor, and I think it matters so much where you land at first, and the people that you are surrounded with make a huge difference in how your career is going to go. At least it did for me. And so I got great training. I had a great preceptor. She was so strong. No BS, huge advocate for the patients, whether she had to push up against physicians, family, her boss, whatever she needed to do. She was a huge advocate for, the patient. And that's how that all started. And then I did 3.5 years in that ICU, and it was a teaching hospital. And I mean, just again, just grateful, and endless learning took place. Very intense, tense learning. I was so in it, so in to my role and my what I was there to do for my patients. And we learned you were expected, at least at that point, you were expected to understand all their labs, all the medications they were on, how they were responding, when their BM was. I mean, you had to know everything about your patient by the time the doctors decided would come around and round, because you were a very integral part of that team. So again, just massive learning. And after that, I still had 2 teenagers at home, and I needed to not be working 4 and 5 12-hour shifts.
Wow.
And so I needed to personally make a bit of a change so that I could be what I needed to be those last few years of parenting those teenagers. So I took a house supervisor position at a rural hospital, thinking, Lord, what have I done? And the first couple of situations, I think, no, don't do that here. Oh,
Nope.
nope,
Nope.
can't do that either. So it took a little bit, but I was impressed by this little rural hospital, and they did a good job with what the resources that they had, and what they couldn't do, they were very, they shipped them off and got them what they needed. So it was fun. It was a fun little job. But then that was like around 2010, and the economy was starting to really get bad, and I was exhausted being a single woman with teenagers. I lived out in the country. I had horses, I had dogs. And an ice storm came, and going to work at 5:30 in the morning, driving it through the country roads, pitch dark, and almost ran into a downed live power line. And I was like, I'm done. And at the hospital, they were, eliminating everything, to the point where the nurse was like, take care of the patients, take out the trash, do and I was like, I had 2 sons that were in the military in Arizona. They're like, Mom, come down here. Okay. I went from Oklahoma to the Phoenix area, and I've pretty much been in and out of Phoenix ever since, that area. Went down there to do ICU, and within a year, all my kids had moved out. And I had always said, as soon as all my kids move out, I'm out. I'm gonna go see the world. And people will be like, you're brave, you're this. I think I'm a little bit stupid. And I do a lot of things. I do a lot of things absolutely petrified. I don't know why. I just do. And I thought, and I literally applied for, I had 3 different options. I just started shooting and with that kind of experience, my options at that point were endless. And I applied for cruise ships. I applied for a travel assignment in Australia, because that had always been one of the places I'd always wanted to go. And then I have this ridiculous adventure side that thought, and I applied for Saudi Arabia and Dubai.
Wow.
All of them called me, and the by far the very best money, of course, was going to be Dubai. But at that time, bless her heart, my mom was always quite supportive of my adventurous side. But at that point, she almost never said no. And that time she said, no, you won't keep your mouth shut. You're thinking you're going to help, and you're going to get yourself in trouble. No. I was like,
wow.
Okay, so let me just go work on the cruise ships. So that's what I did. And I mean, I literally will never forget that very first time I got to get off I'd never done anything. Never. I'd never been on a cruise ship. Never. I didn't know. For all I knew, I was going to, puke my guts out on it. I didn't know. And so the first time I got to get off the ship in the Virgin Islands around Christmas, around my birthday, was just, surreal. I'll never forget that moment. But I was also equally impressed with the fact that the nurses and doctors from all over the world are smart. I mean, it was also the first time in my little naive bubble in America that I realized, ooh, not everybody loves America. Not everybody loves
Ah,
Americans. And
Yeah.
I was 100% a minority. But every ship I was on, I was probably only one of not even 5 Americans.
mm.
And so to learn and practice alongside of doctors and nurses from all over the world was an irreplaceable experience also.
Oh, wow. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, and of course, people be like, well, what did you do? Well, we did, if it happens on land, it happens on sea too. And sometimes even worse because they're drunk. They're, in a lack inhibition. They're on vacations, they're just doing crazy stuff. Plus they get motion sick, they get norovirus, they have lacerations, they have fractures, they have heart attacks, they have strokes, they have death, all of that.
Wow. I
So
don't even think about that ever. I've
No.
never even
yeah,
thought about that.
Yeah.
they have a full setup medical with ventilators and ER and X-rays and labs and morgues on the cruise ships.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, what an experience. Now, you worked all the time. There was usually, like the ships I was on, there was 5 medical people, and there was like 4 to 6,000 people per ship.
Mm.
So, and you ran a clinic for the crew, and plus you ran a clinic on the opposite side of that for guests. And and of course, I got to see Norway. I got to see Alaska, Canada. Went through the Panama Canal multiple times. But I did it alone. I didn't take my best friend. I didn't take my love of my life. I didn't take my kids. It was just me. And so the job itself and the demand is, while most of them are American owned companies, they're not run by Americans, and the work ethic is incredibly different. The expectation is you would do whatever they ask and whenever they ask, whether it's your day off, whether it's 2 a.m, whether, so there was, it was an irreplaceable adventure. I got to see amazing places, but I did it alone and I worked a lot. So after that, I jumped back into ER and did that for quite a while, and then did a little bit of home health, did I'm just kind of in and out of that, just some of the flipping the same roles again. House supervisor again. I've never been whenever you said that I jumped off in the school bus and took off, I always want to tell specifically other women, but men too, if they see that I go and do crazy, crazy things with my career and I'm not afraid of a change. There's a reason why I have that capability. And one of them is I'm perpetually single. And that isn't always a wonderful thing. It's
I hear you.
my picker was broke for many years, and I made bad choices in relationships, and I just finally just stopped choosing. And that comes with a cost. My ability to disconnect and jump off to the next adventure, there's an underlying reason that I'm capable of doing that. And it's not necessarily a good thing. There's reasons for why I have that capability, and we all figure out how to survive in the circumstances that we find ourselves in, right? And that is so, I get it. I remember being tied down to 5 kids and thinking, Lord have mercy. And somebody told me, this is the best years of your life. And I was like, tell me again, that's not true. And yet, wait, of course, now I look back, I think it was amazing. Being a mama was still forever will be the best role I've ever had in my life. But so I can jump off and adventure off into stuff, but there's a reason, there's a reason why I can.
I resonate with that.
Yeah. So, let's see. How do we bring it to date? I was traveling in that bus, and that bus was, Julie, you probably don't even know that, but when I started at that hospital we worked together at, I was probably the most emotionally broken I'd ever been.
Oh.
And it was, I had, again, in personal life, had severely traumatized me. And I was trying to put my pieces back together. And the bus was a massive part of that healing, in that, because literally I just went to work, worked, and came home and worked on the bus. Went back to work, made some more money, came home and went to work on the bus. It was an insane project that, of course, my family thought I literally lost my mind. My single mom, who doesn't even own a drill, just bought a 36-foot school bus and thinks she's going to turn it into her home and travel in it.
Mhm.
So, but I did. And it was so healing. Yeah, it was
Oh,
crazy.
it's awesome. I mean, that's my woodworking journey.
Huh?
I did the exact same thing with the woodworking. It was
To this
my
day, I just, let me build things.
Yeah.
Let me create things. Yeah.
So did you listen to the episode where we kind of talked through how my experiencing of death and suffering, when I found woodworking, it was exactly the opposite. I've got patients that on the one hand are alive trying to die, and on the other hand, and I'm standing over them working with my hands, right?
Mhm.
Taking care of them. And
Yeah.
then when I'm woodworking, I'm taking care of something that's dead and giving it a new life.
Oh
And
yeah.
and I'm standing over it working with my hands. It's the same job. It's just
Yeah.
the opposite side, where it's going from a futile situation to actually building something that I can see with my eyes and I can touch and I can feel, and it's here. There's a permanence to it.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the building actually like makes so much sense with the backdrop of nursing.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Anything that you can busy yourself with, that creating up instead of watching it demise, is cathartic. It's healing, and it's doing something that is, even on the smallest scale, is a positive, and let your mind rest, and
Mhm.
get fed that success versus, brokenness. But
Mhm.
so I did hit the road in that. And my first assignment was, it was hilarious. I'd never even heard of this place before. And it was funny. One of the doctors we worked with at the time, was like, seriously, that's my hometown. I was like, somebody is actually from there. It's the
That's
littlest place
weird.
ever in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still have people that I treasure there. That it was so, to this, literally the scariest thing ever is to get it was for me to get in that bus and drive it to Nebraska and park. And it was supposed to be, I discussed that I did some incredible insulation in that school bus, but the intention was literally never to be in a true winter in it. And I mean, I've felt like, okay, I'm getting out of here fast enough. And the discussion during the interview for that actual job was, when does the snow start? And he was like, not till at least January. Well, of course, that didn't prove to be true. And I lived in that school bus in the middle of nowhere in a little city RV park in an absolute blizzard. And they were like begging me, please don't go home. You're not going to make it back. I said, I have to go home. I have 2 huge dogs that are living in a school bus. I am not going to leave them. What that would have looked like would have been disgusting by the time I got back. It's not happening. I'm going home. But it all worked out. It was crazy. I
Yeah.
have video of me traipsing literally through a blowing blizzard trying to get to the door of the school bus because my car wouldn't make it all the way there. It was crazy. So
Wow.
I went from that to
So you had a car and the school bus.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually did that on one assignment just to see if I could. I was like, can I just stay in your parking lot in my bus? And they're like, okay, sure. And I did it. But it was kind of cool. You just walk out of work and your home's right there. But
Yeah.
it was too close. I was like, no, let me go find a place to park the RV,
Yeah.
bus or whatever. But so I went from back to Kansas City for a bit, just for a layover, regroup. And then I took an assignment in Tucson. And so then I drove the bus all the way to Tucson, got situated there. And of course, that's when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And the neuro ICU that I got a job at, ended up locked down into a COVID ICU. And I did an assignment. And then I thought, Lord, looking around the country and looking around the world we were living in at that point, I went ahead and did another assignment because I thought, I don't want to step out of this and try to blend in, because when you go to different places, it takes time to find out where the bathroom and the gauze is, right? I mean,
right.
So, and who is going to be accepting of you, and you guys can work as a team, and who you're going to just kind of let them hate you, so whatever. And, so I did 2 assignments there. And of course, it was brutal. Everybody, I only other nurses that live through it can actually, I would try to get feedback from my, like my grown children or sisters or whatever. I was needing desperately for them to be like, I understand what you're going through. But the truth is they didn't have that to give. They had no idea.
Nobody does.
Nobody had any idea. And so I was going to work and coming home to a school bus. And then at one point, when I realized I was going to have to extend, it was going to be too hot. And the place I was keeping it, they had already gone back east for the summer. They're like, move into our house, stay in our house while you're there. And so I did that. I got to move into that house. And so the existence was insanity. You just go to work, come home, go to work, come home. And I liken it to, and I had 2 and they're still to this day, my truest and bestest girlfriends that are also nurses. And we talk to each other daily and sometimes hourly. And sometimes I was the one sobbing and sometimes they were the one sobbing. And and sometimes we were both sobbing, but it was just, so much death, and so much nobody understood. The world didn't understand. The government didn't understand. The nurses, the doctors, everybody. That was the first time in my career that I felt like I had no bottom to stand on because nobody really knew what the truth really was, what the right thing really was, what, all of that. So, my conversations about COVID and crimes against humanity and all of that, we could talk for hours and hours and hours about that. But, one of your podcasts is about, the dark humor that we have, as nurses and some of the reasons why and how it serves us. And I remember I worked night shift. That assignment was the last time I ever worked night shift. I was just like, I'm just getting too old. I cannot do it anymore. Yeah. How I got home repeatedly without dying and hurting somebody else. Literally, I don't know. It was, by the grace of God, because, there was many times I got home. I had no idea how I got there. I know I'd slept the majority of the way home.
Yeah.
And driving through mountains to get there. Oof. And so, but literally going to work, and I would have panic attacks there and just I can't go. I can't go in there. I can't go in there. I can't get out of my car. I can't, hyperventilate. You're just like, I can't keep doing this. There was no out. Because leaving was not an option because that meant I left my colleagues and I left those patients and I left the family members that I was holding the iPad up for while they said goodbye to their loved one. I was, I was the person holding up the 2 grandchildren that the family had decided to let come in and spend their 30 minutes saying goodbye to grandma before she passed. And then ushering that, it was just, and yet it was destroying and killing me. And so the whole thing was just, and so that dark humor, I'll never forget one day going to work on the phone with one of my girlfriends. Actually, I called her and I was like, okay, my theme song is on. I want you to hear my theme song right now. And she's like, what are you talking about? And so I just blared the radio, and only nurses would understand this effed up humor. It was Foreigner, Another One Bites the Dust. And I had it blaring in my car, just so much emotion.
Yeah.
Her and I still look back on that time. I got, remember that time I called you when I played Foreigner? Another One Bites the Dust? God, what's wrong with me? You know what's wrong with me? But so, oh my gosh. So
Nothing's wrong with you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's normal.
Yeah. Abnormally normal.
Yeah,
Totally.
So,
that's our normal.
Yeah.
That's our normal.
abnormalities. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
while I was doing that, I was actually also going to school to get my coaching certification. And so after that second assignment, I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot. And so I have to pass the baton. I'm not going to emotionally survive this. I'm not going to be able to come back from this if I don't step away. So, and some of my harebrained ideas, I thought, well, let me just start my company right in the middle of COVID. That's a good idea, because people have all kinds of money and time to decide what they're going to do with their future and what's keeping them from achieving their goals. And of course, that didn't exactly work out. I still believe in it 110%, that whole process, and coming alongside somebody and helping them find their roadblocks and finding their own truths and finding their own path. I love that. I love it. But that was not the time. Yeah. So after a few months, I thought, you know what? Let me just take an assignment at this little hospital. This will be fine. It's just a little bitty hospital. Anything really, really sick is going to go in it. Well, that was just stupid on my part, because that's not where we were at as a country, right? There was no, well, we'll send them down here because they're more equipped. No, you took care of whatever walked through the door, whatever came through the door. And that was, of all my time as a COVID nurse, was the most horrifying, for sure. The most death. We had 2 patients in each ICU room. So one person was taking care of 4 patients on Nimbex, on tube feeding, on Versed, on, all of it, prone, unprone, families, just all of it. And I mean, I'm still kind of bonded to a few of those nurses, because that was too dark to talk about. So, and I've spent a great deal of time working my way past all that and dealing with what I saw happen to families and patients and all of that. So I did that assignment. Then I went to California, did an assignment, I actually started an assignment there. That's the only assignment I ever went. Absolutely not. I cannot. I was so emotionally, I wouldn't say I was emotionally unstable, but I no longer had the ability to give what a nurse has to give, and set aside, I guess, self to give care, and as often nurses have to do. And I couldn't do it anymore. And I found myself so angry, and so I had no ability to be kind, I guess, whenever, and families were starting to come back in, and they weren't acting right. The nurses were trying to figure out how to be professional again, so we weren't really acting right. And during COVID, it was a free-for-all, because we were all just barely even showing up and just trying to survive while we were trying to help people survive. And so that interim right there was just, it was insanity. And honestly, I took care of a trans woman that was not because they were trans, but because they were a severe psych patient. It was just the ugliest, difficult situation to be in, and very, very sick individual, and physically presented as a male, and was screaming and defecating on the floor. And it was just, and so many people outside of the hospital and outside of nursing don't understand sometimes this is what we actually deal with. Not always, but this is a component to it. And this individual presented physically as a male and was screaming and demanding to be addressed differently. And it just wasn't possible for any of us to grant that. It wasn't even that we weren't willing to. The try was there, but it was just impossible. to just, when you're screaming at me and you are just acting a fool in a deep voice and a shadow and male anatomy, it wasn't in our ability, specifically my ability, to constantly use the right pronouns or the right address. And at that point, I was like, I cannot. Wherever we're headed as a society and as environment within the hospital, I cannot do it anymore, because I literally just wanted to say F you and punch him. You know, and that's not who I am. I'm not like that. I've always been able, regardless if I agree with your lifestyle and the things you do and all of those things, I was always able to let my own personal belief be okay and stay in the car and give them what they needed. And I couldn't anymore. And so that is the only assignment. I was just like, I'm done. And one of my best friends, like, just, you got to get through the shift. Do not walk away from that. I said, I cannot do this. I cannot. She's like, make it through the shift and make it through the shift. You know, no abandonment, none of that. Take care of your patients so you walk away. So, and I walked away, and I got through the shift, and I never went back to the hospital after that. I just knew.
Well, you just you weren't your whole self.
Yeah. Not
you
at all.
weren't grounded anymore, and
my heart was just broken. Yeah. So I ended up, which was the coolest thing. It's amazing how things turn out. I ended up becoming an instructor and a team lead of nurses who were instructors, and I could do it remotely. And so you probably saw pictures of that too, Julie. I took a little 2010 Ford Transit Connect, and I turned it into my home, and me and my two massive dogs took off. And I traveled nonstop for 4 solid months. And it was the most, I didn't even know how bad I needed it. It was the most healing to be parked in the middle of nowhere, teaching students, lecturing, grading, testing, and yet I was literally in the middle of the nowhere, living amongst hummingbirds and coyotes and incredible sunsets, and wearing the same clothes 2 or 3 days in a row, and cooking on the back of my van for food. And it was so necessary. I literally went from Arizona to California, all the way across, up almost to the border in North Dakota, all the way back down. When it got hot, I spent a month and a half in Kansas City at a friend's, jumped back in the van, traveled through Arkansas, Texas, New Mexico, and I ended up pretty healed back in Arizona. And it's one of the things I describe is, what healed me the most. 2 friends that knew and understood and felt the same angers and could understand when I was feeling so angry and so broken and so sad. They could totally, so constantly, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of talking to them, and nature. And nature for me is real. It's truthful. It's understandable. It's standing on a dirt road or a dirt trail, physically moving my body and working my body to climb things, to see things. And I say all the time, even if a bear killed me, it didn't do it out of militia. It didn't do it. When I spend so much time in nature, it's probably at some point going to be to my demise, I would assume. I don't know. That's where I spend most of my time. I would much rather die out there than on a couch. And it's real to me. It doesn't, if it ever does hurt me, it's not because it meant to. It's just nature. It can be unpredictable, but I don't know. It's just different. Nature is different for me. That's where I get my healing, and that's where I find God. So
like
you're amazing.
I mean, really.
What's that?
I say you're amazing.
Oh, no, I'm a mess. I promise.
No, we all are. We all are, but you're amazing. You're an amazing person. I'm like, you have lived, and it's so awesome to hear all of this. It's just incredible.
Oh,
Inspiring.
It is inspiring, and it's very just the waves that go through your story are like that of trust and intuition, and trust in your own intuition. You may not have thought you were trusting yourself, but you are, because when you make those decisions to leave and to start the engine and to put the gas and like drive away, that you have faced so much fear, like cross that threshold that holds so many of us back from doing the things that we think we can and maybe want to. But it's like you've also used living as your healing. You know, like we're all hurt. We all get hurt in situations and it hurts us. And then it's our journey to heal through that and to remember who we really are. And you have chosen to actually take action on doing that healing. You know, a lot of us think we can get it from a book or saying mantras or just lying in your bed praying. And that may work for some people, but you know, it has much more impact if you can take those actionable steps. And so it's all, you know, like a journey of healing. You can just see it throughout the moves that you've made and the choices that you've made to do.
Well, and I think you're exactly hit the nail on the head when it comes to trying to heal whatever ails you, because nobody's coming through it without, you know, we're all getting battered and scarred and hurt and broken. And so it does require an action on our own part to figure out where that answer and that healing is. And like you said, it that comes in different ways for different people. You find your healing, but and that's one of the things I love about coaching too, is it empowers a person to understand you actually have it within you.
Yeah.
To figure it out if you'll just listen and go inward. And sometimes you have to just shut out everything around you to hear your own inner voice. But it sounds like, ooh, but it's really not. It's literally just getting quiet and taking the time. And then you have to push through with the action. And let me tell you, Julie, there's times that I got in that bus to drive that bus that it would, when I knew a travel time was coming, I had so much anxiety, so much, what if, you know, and oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I can't afford, if a school bus breaks down, it's going to cost me $10,000. I don't have that, you know. At some point, if you just find a way to keep pushing through the fear and just keep one step, strap down another door, pack another, you know, check the oil, you know, one step at a time, just keep doing steps to move you towards the goal that you have set for yourself. You get there. And man, getting behind the wheel and driving off, sometimes it was like, whew, I may need to start investing in this little cans of oxygen or something. You know, but and I mean, I'm going to be 60 next month. I've pushed myself in that situation enough. I have a lot more trust in myself. And so now that I've been able to push through that fear in so many situations, I think too, I find myself thinking a lot, and it sounds so cliche, when I mean, I'm going to paraphrase it horribly, I'm sure, you know, it's like, well, what if this doesn't work and this doesn't work? And then, but oh my dear, what if it does? You know, and what if it does? And oftentimes it does. And if it doesn't, what's okay?
That's its own journey.
Okay. Yeah. You learn, you learn, and and for me, I mean, I know I push to an extreme sometimes with wilderness and being out in the middle of, and maybe it's because at this point in life, and age and stuff, I'm like, I want to, I mean, I have a goal in life to live to be 100,
Mhm.
but if that's not what's meant to be, then it's just not,
Right.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode.
Remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
Keep the dialogue going by connecting with us on social media posted in the links below, or by visiting our website.
Together, let's continue to redefine nursing and shape a brighter future for those we care for. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep nurturing those connections.
And don't forget to be kind to yourself.